listening to the IELTS podcast. Learn from tutors and ex-examiners who are masters of IELTS preparation. Your host, Ben Worthington.
Hello there, IELTS students. In this tutorial, we're looking at pronunciation. Now, pronunciation is quite a tricky point, and you probably won't find that much information out there about pronunciation because it's difficult to teach. It's difficult to adapt for each student, and so it's a bit of a challenge. But I'm going to share with you in this tutorial some common misunderstandings of pronunciation, some common pronunciation features, and a little bit of advice about correcting your pronunciation. Now, the reason why I want to talk about the features is because by being aware of certain features of the English language, you'll be able to identify them and then work on them specifically. So this is another high value IELTS speaking tutorial, and I honestly recommend just grab a pen, make notes. You might as well, develop those. And another useful skill, which is like simultaneously listening, processing and noting information, because this skill is useful for your IELTS listening exam as well. So before we start, my name is Ben Worthington. I've been teaching IELTS now for well over 10 years. I started as a common, mere generalist English tutor. I was teaching kids in the afternoons after school. I was teaching adults during the day. I was teaching business students in the morning. And it was a bit of a mess, in all honesty. And also, especially teaching adolescents, that was just horrible because they were only there because the parents made them. That was just a brutal 60 minutes to get through. And one afternoon, I had this university student who wanted to get to England, and she was struggling with the IELTS. So I was like, yeah, bring it over. I'll help you. No problem. Overconfident Ben. And we sat down and I was like, how hard can it be? It's one of those, to what extent do you agree, disagree? And when we got stuck into it, it was just utter frustration. We were going around in circles. It was confusing. We were repeating ourselves. We didn't know how to organize our thoughts. We didn't know what the exam wanted from us. We didn't know about the exam format. It was just an absolute embarrassing and humiliating experience for myself. So on that day, I was like, I've got to master this. So I started asking local tutors. I started asking IELTS experts, and I was like, this is valuable information I'm getting. So I decided to record these conversations, and then I was like, well, there's no point recording them and just keeping them to myself. I'll publish them online so other students and tutors can benefit from this knowledge. And that's how I started IELTS podcast. And eventually I was just gaining so much information that I was like, right, it's time to organize, process, put this information into a course. I was testing what was working. I was like, okay, this is good advice. Definitely putting this into the course. This is garbage. That's going to be deleted. No way I'm ever repeating that. And eventually I got this really strong online course, and it was insanely valuable. Students started passing, started doing success stories. And then a few months ago, last year, to be specific, I was like, okay, we've got information now, but what we need now, what smart students are going to need are tools. And that's when we launched the AI essay checking tool. And soon we're going to be launching our AI speaking tool. And if there are any developers listening to this tutorial, then get in contact. Send us an email to ben@IELTSPodcast.com and put developer in capital letters in the subject line. And ideally, we can work together. I need to put all my speaking knowledge, all the knowledge I've been imparting in private classes over the last couple of years. I need an app to do this so I can get more students to England, to Australia, to Canada, get them the PR, get them the job as a doctor in the UK, get them onto the master's course in Canada. We need to get more students passing IELTS exam. It's terribly unfair that some students have all the skills, all the knowledge, to work in the UK or to study in the UK, but they can't afford a speaking tutor, or they can't afford the price of the exam, whatever. And it's just unfair. And technology is here to change this. It's opening up education, and we need to be at the front because, there's too many garbage courses out there already. And, we need to get my knowledge from my head into an app and start helping another million students, the next generation that deserve the best education. So let's jump into it. Today's podcast, as I said, all about pronunciation. Let's have a look at some common misunderstandings about pronunciation. Let's start off with the official band descriptors. Now, even as a tutor, I look at the criteria from the official IELTS PDF, and I'm like, this is vague. Like, what does this mean? And other ex-IELTS examiners have said the same. This is vague. I mean, they've got a similar copy, and they've told me, they said, yeah, our copy that they use internally isn't that much different. So it's incredibly challenging for even the IELTS examiners. They need a lot of experience. It's even more challenging for tutors, as I just said, because this is a tricky area of tuition that a lot of tutors just kind of sidestep, and especially non-native English tutors, because they've got to, it's just something that won't come naturally for them either. So this is why it's kind of like a weak spot. But don't you worry. The second point I want to mention about misunderstandings with pronunciation and with your accent maybe is that a lot of students come to me and they say, Ben, I want to sound British, or Ben, I want to sound American. I don't like my own accent. And I say, look, the importance with your accent, the important thing is with your speaking is that you are understood. The importance here is the communication. This is language after all. When I speak Spanish, and when I started speaking Spanish, I didn't care that much about grammar. I didn't care that much about pronunciation. All I cared about was getting my point across, was being understood. Once I got understood, I started refining the smaller details such as the grammar and the pronunciation. And obviously, you're not going to be misunderstood. You're not going to be understood if you're pronouncing the words incorrectly, but you don't have to push it to the point of sounding like you've been living with the Queen. Actually, nobody's been living with the Queen recently because she's gone. You don't have to sound like you've been living with King Charles for the last 6, 7, 8 years. You don't need to reach that level. Nobody speaks like the King or Queen of England anyway in England, apart from that small family down the south. Anybody who's been to England or anybody who's interacted with native English speakers usually have this experience. They're like, oh my goodness, what we learnt at school is useless because nobody in England sounds like that. We've got the Northerners, we've got the Southerners, we've got the East Coasters, all this absolute carnival of different accents. So anyway, when you do come to England with your own accent, you'll be more than welcome, trust me. Let's jump into some pronunciation. One last thing I want to say about accent. Don't be ashamed. If you've got an accent, then you've taken the time to learn somebody else's language. And this is why it drives me insane when people when they take the mickey out of other people for their accent. When people did it with me with my Spanish, I took it on the chin. I took it jokingly. But inside, I was just like, I'm in your country and I'm speaking your language and I'm getting mocked. Like, come on, give me a break. I never said that, but that was like my internal conversation. So don't be ashamed. You want to go for communication. You want to go for being understood, and be proud. Be proud. Just keep moving forward. Pronunciation features. I'm going to give you 5 pronunciation features here that will help you, because once you're aware of these, you can identify them and you can work on them. And also, if you incorporate them and you learn these, making notes, as I said before, when you're listening, you can start paying attention to these features. I read the other day that intelligence is the ability to distinguish at ever higher levels. How beautiful is that? The ability to distinguish at ever higher levels. So, for example, I see 3 trees. My friend, who's an arborist, studied trees and biology for the last 3 or 4 years, he would say that's a sycamore, that's an oak, and that's a birch. And that's a higher level of intelligence, of being able to distinguish at a higher level. So anyway, hopefully you can take this knowledge into your listening skills as well. So let's go. Intonation. Intonation is the music of your speech. It's the ups and the downs, and this is incredibly important. Each language has its own music, and that music of your own language is going to impact how you speak English. So it's probably a good idea to jump online. Imagine you're an Arabic speaker or a Persian speaker, and you go, common pronunciation errors for Persian speakers of English, or common pronunciation errors for German speakers of English, or whatever. And there you'll be able to identify them. So another thing with pronunciation is that in the English language, and most English languages actually, we usually go up at the end of the sentence when we are when we are asking a question, because going up at the end of the sentence usually conveys some uncertainty. Are the shoes here? We have this intonation. In fact, in one academy I used to work at, we used to pound the students with drills like, are you eating cornflakes? I am eating... No, what was it? Are you eating cornflakes? You are eating cornflakes. You're not eating cornflakes. It was just drill after drill, but it worked. Anyway, that's the importance of intonation. We drilled it so much to the point that it became natural and automatic. Moving on. Chunking. Chunking is how we group our words together. So this is affected a lot if you hesitate a lot. So correct chunking gets rid of this problem. And we can chunk phrases, collocations, idiomatic expressions. All of these features can be chunked together, and they help you sound more fluent, more confident, and also because you're saying like, 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8 syllables all at once, and it's probably a group of syllables, sounds, words that you've said numerous times, because it is a chunk, you're going to say it quicker, you're going to have more confidence. The listener is going to be expecting, you start off this phrase, this collocation, the listener is now expecting you to complete that collocation, phrase, or idiomatic expression. And this helps listener strain. It eases the listener strain. It becomes easier for them to understand you, and it takes a bit of the focus off the pronunciation or your accent. So this is why chunking is incredibly useful. Now you need to incorporate chunking into your speech, and we can do this by using certain phrases, like for example in part 2, to be honest, I've never really thought about that before, or to be honest, that's a question I've never really considered. Well, to be honest, I'm not really an expert on this. However, you see, there are lots of these different expressions and chunks and collocations, and we've incorporated as many as we can into our speaking confidence course, because they just speed up the rate at which you sound fluent. They bring a level of automaticity to your language skills, and they boost your confidence as well, because once you start this phrase, and you know you've been understood by using it numerous times previously, there's now that little bit, you've bought yourself a few microseconds to think about what you're going to say next and organize the rest of your speech. Now, this is why we've included it in the Speaking Confidence course. Just one more side note. The Speaking Confidence course is available now at a tremendous discount as part of a bundle for all the students when they upgrade to the premium essay checker. So first you start using the essay checker, the automatic essay checker. I recommend you upgrade to the premium version because we measure more data points. It takes slightly longer, but you get to get your essay back, to get it evaluated with an estimated band score, but you get a more accurate band score estimate, and more importantly, you get the opportunity to buy the bundle of courses at a ridiculous discount, and you'll get the academic course for helping you group, select, choosing what information to use on academic task 1. You get obviously the sentence guide with all the band 9 frameworks. You get the Speaking Confidence course. You get a ton of tools and benefits from upgrading. So have a look at that. Now, the second part of chunking is that if you are chopping up your chunking, then it gets confusing. So just bear that in mind. Once you start that chunk, finish it, and don't try and go back and correct it, and don't stop in the middle. It gets confusing. The third point I want to talk about is timing of language. I have a Spanish friend, Jose. He speaks ridiculously fast in Spanish and Valencian to me, and it takes me a while to tune into what he's saying. After a couple of minutes, I can usually get up to speed and I can usually understand him. And the problem though, when he speaks English, is he carries over this speed into his into English language. He carries it over, and he carries over all the syllables and all the stress features from Spanish into English, and it becomes incredibly difficult to understand him. Now, another point with the timing of the language, you're going to sound more confident, you're going to sound clearer if you just slow it down. It's going to seem a little bit awkward for you at first. You might think, I don't sound that fluent, but slow it down, speak a little bit more in a little bit more of a measured, controlled fashion. You're probably going to lose a little bit of fluency, but you will gain in accuracy and you will gain in comprehension. Now, let's look at it technically. There are two types of timing in languages. We've got the stress timed and the syllable timed. English is a stress timed language, meaning that the stressed syllables are longer than the unstressed ones. Now, this is a point that my Spanish friend Jose completely throws out of the window, and this is why it's almost incomprehensible to understand him when he's speaking English. After 5-10 minutes, it starts to become clear what he's saying, but we all know you don't have 5 or 10 minutes. Like in an exam condition, you've got to go in there already comprehensible, legible, calm and confident. Penultimately, word stress. Now in English, we stress the certain words to give emphasis. This adds another layer of meaning to what we're saying. Obviously, we lose this when we're reading or when we're writing to a certain extent. Let me just give you an example. So you're probably aware there's if I want to say, I don't want to play football, I can say it like that. It's fairly neutral. Now, if I want to emphasize it, I can say the full version, and I can say, I do not want to play football. And you can hear the stress there on the word do not, on the auxiliary and the negation. I do not want to play football. And this is the word stress. And likewise, if I really wanted to play football, I could say I want to play football. But if I really, really wanted, I would say, I do want to play football on Thursday, for example. I do want to play football. So this is how you can stress the words and add that layer. An added layer, it's almost like body language. And it just adds that other dimension that enables and facilitates and improves your communication. And again, imagine a typical part 3 question. Is trust an important concept in your country? Yes, trust is absolutely an important concept in our country. That sounds so much stronger, so much more eloquent than saying, yeah, it is. Trust is, it's quite important. No, I slowed down, I emphasized, I reflected the tense that was given to me. And again, I can't go into this in much detail because we're already approaching 20 minutes. We've still got some points to finish, to mention, but I go into this in far more detail and I give you the tools to help you improve your speaking faster. And as I said, you can get that speaking confidence course and all the tools to improve your essays and to pass the exam faster than ever before. You can get that when you start upgrading to the premium essay checker. Finally, individual word sounds. Each language has certain sound patterns. Some of these are compatible with the sounds in English. Others are definitely not. Mispronouncing these certain sounds can lead to misunderstandings. A point that comes to mind now is the H sound in Spanish is quite a ch, whereas in English it's very soft. It's almost, it's just very airy. Now, almost all Spanish speakers pronounce the H like, hello, how are you? And it's not tragic, but it definitely needs to be softened just to improve the chances of being understood correctly and accurately first time. Finally, correcting your pronunciation. Now, when I started off these tutorials, a lot of tutors said, listen, record, review, and that's solid advice. I then learned, mimicking, where you listen and you just go and mimic it and you do it for longer periods of time and you try and replicate what you are hearing, not only the words, not only the vocabulary, the sounds, the intonation, the chunking of the phrases, all of what I just mentioned before. And this is still solid advice. You can still do this. If you want to go a little bit fancier, you can use tools such as ELSA, such as Gliglish. There's lots of tools out there now that specifically focus on pronunciation. I haven't looked at that many of them. I tried a year or two ago, but I wasn't impressed. I need to go back into them. If anyone's got any good suggestions, please email them into me. I'd love to hear some of your experiences. But long and short of it is immersion. Make use of your downtime. Get your earbuds in, get your headphones on when you're on the bus, on the metro, when you're traveling. Make use of that time. Listen to as much authentic native English speaker material as you can. Also, start taking notes while you're listening. Make it into an active listening exercise rather than a passive one. Take note of certain phrases. One of my favorite phrases at the moment is you could not be more wrong. I just heard it somewhere and I was like, I'd love to use that that phrase, and I still haven't had the opportunity. You could not be more wrong. But this is the beauty of language, you start accumulating all these phrases, and then the perfect moment comes to use this phrase or use this word. But I tell you what, a couple of weeks ago I was in a cafe. I was co-working with some friends, and I think he was a Dutch guy actually. He asked me, he was like, Ben, do you know any words for somebody who's a bit outdated? And I was like, yes. And I saw this word a couple of words ago. It's really unique. I impressed everybody, so you can understand why I'm telling the story again. But the word was troglodyte, and it just means someone who's a bit backward, a bit cavemanish, stonemanish, and even the French friend who's there, he was like, Interesting. It's a French word. I did not know you could use it in English. And I was like, yeah, I didn't know either. I didn't know it was a French word. Yeah, but the more studying you do, the more preparation you do, the more chance you've got for using these phrases, for using this vocabulary, and using it in its right time, at the perfect timing. So let's just move to the conclusion. Like, the conclusion here is like, put the time in. You will improve. You will find maybe you're doing a week, 2 weeks, and you don't see any improvements, and then you do retake the test and you're like, wow, actually I have improved. Or maybe by the third week you just see this big jump. Language acquisition is not a straight line. In all honesty, it's more like an S curve where you just put in hours and hours, you get nowhere, and then all of a sudden you make a tremendous gain, and then you're back to putting hours and hours and only seeing small gains. So hang in there. IELTS preparation is the same. It's about putting the hours in there, doing it consistently rather than just smashing it for 10 hours on a Sunday. Go in there, do it consistently, build those skills, make notes, and you will get there. Trust me, you will get there. We get students every day thanking us. They're in Australia, they're doing a master's in Canada, they're working as a nurse in the UK. You can do this. And there has never been a better time for doing this with all these tools now available. And, as I said before, smart students in 2023 are using tools, not information. They're using tools like our AISA checker, which gives them the grade faster, quicker, and you can just get on that improvement and feedback cycle far faster and just get better prepared and stop wasting money. And get to your dream location. So that's it from me today. Have a beautiful day. And remember, if there's any developers who are listening, and you're interested in teaming up with me, and we'll make this speaking chatbot that's just going to, just open education. It's going to get that nurse that job in the UK. It's going to get the Indian guy who lives in a village who can never afford a teacher and has been disadvantaged and just like purely unfair, never got the opportunity to practice his speaking, even though he's more than capable than a lot of the other students who could afford a tutor and are now in Canada. That's just a disgrace, and it should not be happening in 2023. This is why we need a developer who's just, who wants to democratize education with me and who wants to get as many students through this exam as possible. And that's it. I almost got angry there. So if you are one of those developers, get in contact, ben@IELTSPodcast.com, and put developer in capital letters in the subject line, and we'll have a call, we'll get together, and hopefully we can build this beautiful speaking app that's just going to open education up to those who deserve it and get the results that they want. Have a beautiful day, all the best, good luck with your exam, and thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening to IELTSPodcast.com.